If you would like your business users to be able to request Yammer communities through Cloud Governance and/or MyHub in the same way they can request site collections in SharePoint and MS Teams, then you first go into Cloud Governance, create the approval process you will use, build the community policy that you want to assign at the point of provisioning, and then in Request Management on the Settings page, we go out and click on Service. At the top left, we can click Create, and under Provisioning, out to the far right, we have Create Group Team Community. We then select the language, scroll down, assign a category, make choices about the department that will be associated with. In this case, I'm just going to pick IT for everything and hide it from the business users so they don't have to worry about it. Decide how the service will be accessible in the service catalog as something they can request directly and/or available through questionnaires if we are using questionnaires. Who has access to the service? Who is the service contact and the service administrator? The service contact is typically a business user associated in some way with that service as part of a business process. In this case, I'm going to pick one of my business users from my demo tenant. Then we click Next. Step 2 of the wizard, what are you trying to create? In this case, we are doing Yammer community. Select the tenant. You may have multiple tenants associated with this single deployment of Cloud Governance, so please be sure to select the one that you want to work with. Do you want to hide the community as a default in Outlook? This encourages users to go through the default Yammer website, to go through the Communities app in Teams for Yammer, or to even use something like AvePoint MyHub, where they can view all of their various workspaces in a single interface. Do you want to allow public and/or private as a choice? If you wanted everything, for instance, to be private, you could select that and choose Assign by IT, so that way you would only get private communities. Maybe I'll just set mine to private as a default, but I will let the business user decide at the time of creation. And I'm not going to make it a hub site. And we click Next. Who is going to be the primary community contact? This is very similar to a site collection contact and a Teams contact in that tasks that are generated in relation to this particular workspace will generally be routed to that person. Remember, we could specify an individual user, or we could type the $ to pick one of our roles. If I want the person making the request to be the contact, we'll select that. I do not have to add a secondary contact at this time, though you are typically encouraged to do so. Would you like to assign admins? I can pick, as you can see, the same person here. And if I'd like to let the business user make the choice, again, we leave that set in this box. For instance, it's possible this person is making this request, but not for themselves. In that case, I'm assuming that they're going to be the contact, but I'm going to let them change that if they want to. I'm assuming they're going to be the admin, but they can change that if they want to. For community members, I'm going to leave that blank. I will let them assign the community members at the time of creation, though I could either fill people into that box or allow them to set up essentially searchable rules that let them do it by department or some other type of metadata. Again, I'll leave that set to Assign by Business User. Then we get down to the policy. In a previous video, we took a look at creating a community policy, and you can see the policy now shows up here. Remember, the policy controls things like quota, lease period, inactivity threshold, and so on. The logic is that what we are filling out here is the service request that a business user will go and engage with to request this community. But when they actually click Submit, and then we approve the request, how does the community get created? It gets created according to the policy. Now, in this case, I'm not selecting multiple ones, so I'm actually going to hide that from the business user. No reason for them to even see it. But if you gave them several choices based on several different policies, each with different settings, then you would need them to pick one. I click Next, Step 4, do we want to add any custom metadata that we may have created? Enable the AvePoint Cloud Governance app for the underlying SharePoint site collection that's going to get created. Would you like to construct the community name, essentially defining a prefix that has to be used? What links would you like to show up as part of the request? Essentially, when you go into Yammer and you go to the community, if you go to the About page, you can see information related to that particular community. If you didn't want them to use Planner, if it's not something as an organization you use, you can simply uncheck that. The approval process, which would have been something I had previously created. Remember, the approval process is there, so that way when the user submits this request, it routes to someone to verify that this thing should be created. In this example, we have set up a single stage approval to one person, but we could of course do multiple stages if necessary. And do I want to allow that person, before they approve, to actually edit the request? Custom actions. If you have your own custom scripts, your own custom web services, so when a user makes this type of request or any type of request using cloud governance, essentially the tool can call out to that outside code to run additional actions. You could run those actions at various points in the process. You would simply have to check that off and then point to that service. Finally, do you want to put this on an execution schedule? If you do not use an execution schedule, the user submits the request, the approver approves it, and then the community will get created right at that time. Building an execution schedule allows you to schedule that work to be done later on, say in off hours. If I've configured everything the way that I want, now up at the top I can click on Save and Activate. We can now see Request New Yammer Community is an active service. So if a user was to go, for instance, into My Hub and click New Request on the home page, or go over to Start a Request, under Provisioning, we can see Request New Yammer Community. They click that, they fill out the form according to all the choices we just made, and ultimately they will submit, which will kick off the approval process. Thank you for watching this short video on how to create a new Yammer community service in Cloud Governance.